Justin Hogg.
Hi, I'm Justin. I'm gonna read some fiction I wrote. It's like a fictional interview between an interviewer and someone named C, who I've sort of been trying to explore things with, like questions about race, history, like family, things of that sort. Okay. Interviewer. Your recent novel has much to say about love. What do you say about it? In other words, what experiences formed your ideas about love? Are they tied to people, your country? C. I learned about love through someone I had presumed was loveless. We met that day with my arms folded, my lips sore from so much applied pressure. In those times, much of my pain was self-inflicted, and it rendered itself visible on my body. My body was a littered canvas, and the events happening to me set in motion by an amateur masquerading as a virtuoso. What I felt became seen. Being a young person still, I had copious amounts of hatred. Not that hatred isn't something a young person should have, but so much of it for me was misapplied, like the dove who has to flap their wings 100 times per minute just to catch a glimpse of the hawk's reserved glare, who glides with ease on heat lines meters above. But as you can see, I am no dove, nor am I a hawk, and nothing about hatred is natural anyway. The day was lurid, the sun turning the back of a person's neck a kind of cast iron bronze in a brief moment of contact. It was my weekend to bring the disabled and the elderly their groceries, a job I couldn't stand in part because it forced me to confront a past which had not passed. I don't wish to say more on that. Anyway, there sat this man, the last of my rounds, content in his sweat, submerged inside of a fig-colored chair which smelled of swelling chitlins. If my arms were folded away from any kind of reception, then his opened wide as if to take in everything. Pants pulled up so high that you could see the hairs on his legs sprouting out like lazy marks from a pen. In front of him a small monitor, maybe 15 inches wide, displaying a woman opening her eyes wide to appear bright, her fake jeweled dress sparkling loudly in black and white, with title words that translated to "One Small Moment of the Night." Her eyebrows went up and down in an exaggerated display as she began to sing, sitting down on steps that adorned an otherwise naked television set. She held her hands close to her body in that catered way that singers from the old country do. Oh right, you probably don't know what I mean. In my country, singers appearing on television back then always kept their hands tightly drawn in, a kind of symbolism suggesting, in my reading, an inseparability from their land of birth and their people. Myself and other young persons of my generation couldn't stand this mannerism, and so when we walked in the streets, we made a point to strut with our arms extremely far apart from our waists and torsos. We walked as though our limbs were elastic. We never crossed our legs, and if we bothered with love interests, hand-holding was out of the question. But as I was telling, the old man for whom I had cabbage and brown rice, marinated chicken and goat's milk, he hadn't noticed me enter. I noticed in the silence of the singer's words that he was softly crying at his television set. How pathetic, I thought. The elderly man was schnappling his legs, crying at an old folk song on the television, shedding tears over a time that can never be returned to him. It was like something out of a fable adults tell children so that they'll never stray too far from home. The song was everything a young person during that time of our country's existence could hate. Emotional lyrics relating a kind of bucolic pre-revolutionary sentiment, only shared by those older generations thrust into the throes of a modern city against their will. Of course, the idea of the modern city was still a newborn calf in our minds. The atrocities of development, urbanization, and capitalist exploitation all subterranean in our lived experiences. But certainly, despite our ignorance, a genetically oversized cow nonetheless, engorged with damning substances forcibly fed from the West. Not that a return to former life was what would have ultimately saved us either, but the Western infiltration of progress that our leaders foolishly ingested wasn't the answer. It wasn't until years later that I realized what made up the man's tears, what lay in the song's potential, a third way, if you will, that he wasn't pathetic, nor lost. In those days, one could coat mountains with my disgust. People told me to smile, and I spat. I still spit on them today. But if only I could have approached situations non-dogmatically in those days, and in that moment with a man, the dispossession of rejecting anything that didn't fit exactly my political line, and truly enjoyed a moment with him, and that time devoid of genuine moments. This would have required a nakedness on my part, a stripping down, a rip which would have leaked my facade of elastic limbs. On the fig couch was a man from my country who had loved as I had loved, who had lost as I had lost. What was then repetitive and annoying in the bright-eyed woman singing was later discerned as cyclical and harmonious. Her voice a stream in which the old man's hands became pruny within, a stream he wouldn't dare inch away from. In each contraction of her throat, a memory which could not be swallowed, a trill akin to the heart dropping, not just a repetition, but a return, vocal lines aligning moments and experiences. June 1987. They visit the exhibit of Diego Rivera in the Modern Art Museum just months before the city demolishes it. The road which joins their distant towns is made of brown clay which stains their socks. They lock arms even as the sun mugs their bodies of water. They aren't sure about that word which must anchor relationships, because for every moment they touch, there are two moments where one dances away from the other and cannot be touched. They realize the futility of such a thought. They meet on that day, and that's enough. They are unconcerned with the constant interrogation of every inch of their relationship. They imagine a liquid futurity gliding along interlocked. Thoughts drift between the ocean which they have never seen, and the thin lining of clay under a fingernail, and in between a lock of hair. As they enter the exhibit, one turns right and the other left. They spend hours lost in murals and inordinate paintings, and seldom do they avert their eyes to check for and in on the other. If they pass each other by chance, they do so in humble silence, the absent ping sounding. A forced connection left untouched. They meet by the entrance again, and explode the silence with their thoughts of the exhibit. The singer smiled on the television as the instrumental carried on, and for a second I encountered what felt like a singular drop of water quelling in a deep well under the city's pores. What was lost did not become found, but became active, tangible, stimulated by her voice and its calm movements. That he too could have a hatred for our oppressors, the cause of death's fragments in his leg, I didn't at all consider then, because I had made up my mind that a man who sat in a fig-colored chair would die there, as empty as a storm drain in a drought. But that he could also be capable of a profound and radical love returned to him again and again on the television set, and through one of our great singers' voices, was like a finely cracked puzzle that wasn't at all scattered to begin with. That love is not something that can be limited to the elongated chest of any individual, but something that is set out in motion, which responds to antagonization, no matter how small, which can only be viewed from an infinite number of sides, but never the side of the oppressor. Thanks.